buy-side M&A due diligence. In this video, I'll be covering the 3 areas of due diligence when you are going to buy a business. So what are the 3 areas of due diligence? Number 1 is legal. So legal due diligence. We're just going to refer to due diligence as DD. The second part is financial. Now, when I say financial is second, actually financial is first, so let's just pretend financial is above legal. Just leave it there for now. And then you've got operational due diligence. Operational DD. Now, when it comes down to legal due diligence, you're just going to give that to your lawyers. It's very simple, right? So you're going to say, lawyers, here you go. You guys are specialists when it comes down to this. Please check this business. Now, let's get into a very quick point here. Is that whether it's your lawyers, or whether it's your accountants, or whether it's even you, when it comes down to due diligence, don't be so slow that you're going to kill the deal. This is actually, don't kill the deal. Don't kill the deal with slow DD. And it's not just slow DD. Don't kill the deal with overly onerous DD. This is really important when it comes down to your lawyers and your accountants. Is that now your accountant a little bit more important, but when it comes down to lawyers, don't forget lawyers are paid to, number 1, know the law, and that's really important. I'm not saying that don't listen to your lawyers at all. I'm not saying that at all. But they are paid to know the law and then put that law in a document to protect you, which is of course what you want to do. You want to have the most amount of protections as a buyer, and that's the whole point of doing due diligence, whether it's legal, financial or operational. But they sometimes get so bogged down in arguing about words which actually have very little basis on the reality of a business acquisition, right? Or what can happen. I have found that 90% or 95%, in fact, there's only ever been like 2 things that have ever come out of an entire SPA or an APA when we've done a deal. Two clauses that we've ever had to refer to. We've never had to refer to any of the clauses in any of the contracts that we've done, apart from 2. So actually it doesn't even matter. And those 2 are to do with the financial. So basically, it was the legal definition of some of the financial mechanisms that we had. And specifically, they were to do with the basket, meaning what's the lower threshold of the basket of a warranty claim that we can make against the seller post-acquisition. Now that's a bit of a mouthful. In reality, what that meant is that something happened in the business that was from the time of the seller. So an invoice came up, not something happened. An invoice came up from the business while we owned it, which was from the time of the seller, and the seller was refusing to pay that invoice. So we just had to go back to the document and we had to show them, right, you are liable for this because it meets the minimum threshold. I think it was like £5,000 or something like that. I mean, the invoice was £5,000 and the threshold was something like 1,000. Don't quote me on that. And we said, right, you have to pay for it. And then they paid for it. Simple as. So, 95% of the things that you're going to put into the legal document won't even matter in reality of things. And there's always going to be a practical way of dealing with it post-acquisition. But that's not without saying, listen to your lawyers. Just don't look, you need to put the entrepreneurial hat on. You are the entrepreneur. They're not going to own the business once you have completed the deal. You're going to own the business. Now, if you're going to own the business and you know the industry, and you should know the industry, if not, you should hire people who know the industry, and we're going to cover that in operational due diligence. You should know enough to say that, right, this actually isn't a big deal, and this is a big deal. So you should, being an expert in your industry, business owner right now, or hiring people who do know the industry, should be able to differentiate the legal terms in the document that actually have an impact or can come up in the operation of the business, and therefore you have to refer to it. Otherwise, your job is to move the deal to completion. Move it to completion. And we found as well, it's really important with the legal documents, and I'm going a bit of a tangent here, but when it comes down to the legal documents, our first legal document is quite big. And we've trimmed it right down. I can't remember what our current legal document is, but it's not more than 20 pages. Even that, I mean, I'm just saying, I don't even know how big it is anymore. But it's a lot smaller. We've trimmed it by 3/4 or something. And even, actually, a lot of the legal DD that we do is more to do with flushing out problems from the seller. So what we're getting them to do is we're getting them to disclose problems. We're getting them to disclose problems. And we'll cover about disclosures in a minute, but what we're saying to them is that, look, you're agreeing to this clause here, so therefore if there's a problem post completion, you're going to have to pay for it if you don't tell us right now. So then what happens is that the seller is then forced to tell us about any situation that's happening in the business, which could be detrimental to us post-acquisition. I think that's the best way of doing these documents, because what it does is that it keeps the document small, meaning costs down, legal costs down, and it moves the seller to say, right, you know what, let me be truthful and upfront right now and tell the seller, tell the buyer, tell you about this right now, and then therefore we can get to completion. And it also forces them to come to a compromise, because actually, let's get down to this. I got this saying from Dan Pena, is that due diligence is just an excuse to reduce the price. So DD is an excuse to reduce price. Now, that is partially true. It either reduces the price of the business or enables you to have better terms. Whichever way you work out, it works out better for you as a buyer. So the better your due diligence is, the better price you end up with, because we said in the heads of terms that forms the basis, but it's not legally binding to be on that basis. Later on you'll be like, okay, we saw this problem, we found this problem, this happened in your business, for example, so actually the purchase price needs to be adjusted, normally lowered. Or for example, the terms need to be better for you as a business buyer for you to go and complete the deal. So that's due diligence. But anyway, coming back here, legal due diligence, just hand it to your lawyers. But remember, your job as a entrepreneur with entrepreneur hat is to get this deal to completion, to move it along, to say to the lawyers, thank you very much. We have listened to your advice and we agree with you on this, or on this one, you know what, just let it go. I'll give you an example, is that in the previous deal that we did, there was one clause with regards to security of tenure, and that was to do with the property, that the lawyers were telling me don't go for the deal. So they were saying kill the complete deal because of this clause called security of tenure. Now, what does security of tenure mean, or what does it imply? What is the result of it? Basically, what security of tenure is that if you are a leaseholder, then when it comes down to the end of your lease, in this case it was 10 years, then you have automatic right of stay, even if the lease is not renewed. But if you opt out of security of tenure, which is what actually the seller was asking us to do, and we had another mechanism to protect us, I'll mention that in a minute, is that if you opt out of security of tenure, you have to renew the lease to be able to stay in the property. Now, the lawyers were telling us to say, right, you know, don't just kill the entire deal. Well, my argument was that we have first right of refusal on the purchase of the property. So, for example, and not only first right of refusal, but we had an option on the property, which means is that if the seller wanted to sell the property to anyone, they would have to come to us and offer us the property first. And also, we had a mechanism to say that we have the option to buy the property from the seller. So I was saying that even if, for example, they don't give us security of tenure, we have first right of refusal, and we have the option to buy the property, so therefore we're protected in that way. And even though, for example, there were lawyers, they were saying, you know what, actually, you're right. So a non-lawyer, me, told the lawyers that actually, in a commercial sense, we're okay. And then we got the deal completed, and now we've got nice profits coming in from that business. Now, even though you are moving a deal forward, don't be afraid to kill deals during the due diligence process. So don't be afraid to kill deals. I now would rather lose, for example, 10,000 than to make a bad acquisition. I'd rather lose 10k than do a bad acquisition. I'm going to write it, yeah? Why? Because I know that losing this 10k, losing this 20k at the state of due diligence, the time that's been invested in this due diligence stage is going to be cheaper than doing a bad acquisition. And I learned that because I done an acquisition. Now I spent about 80 something grand I think I lost in this acquisition. Can't remember the exact number. Let's just say it's 80 grand. Why do I say that? I say that because the return on investment that you want to try and get from an acquisition is 20% plus. Right? This is the low end. Unless you're doing sort of mid-cap businesses or upper mid-cap businesses, then you might not be too bad by going to 16% ROI or cash on cash. But where we're operating in the small business and the lower mid-cap space, you want at least 20% plus ROI. You don't want anything less than that. Cash on cash. So the reason why I say it's lost about 80k on that is because we've done this acquisition and it's returning me about 10% at the moment. So you can get 10% with a property deal. Now, is it easy to get 10% on a property deal? No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's not, so common in the UK, for example. You have to go up north and you have to find that particular deal that you can get 10%, yield on that investment. But I'm only getting 10% on a business, and the business is super risky, especially in this small business, because that business is a small business. So it would have been better for me to kill the deal, and at that time I think I would have lost, about 15 grand or something like that, instead of losing the 80. Because I'm only making 10% ROI on that deal. Now, is getting 10% the worst situation in the world? No, because I'm getting 10%. However, if I got that 80k and I put it into another deal, in fact, after this deal, I was working on another deal that would have got us about 30% ROI, 30% cash on cash return. If I had allocated that 80k to the next deal. And I had more investors interested in that other deal. I had more investors interested in that other deal. It was a bigger deal, and I would have got 30% cash on cash return on that 80k if I'd done that. That's within 1 year, by the way. In 1 year, I would have got that return. So don't be afraid to kill deals. It's better to kill a bad deal than to do a bad deal and lose some money. Now, I know it's difficult on your first deal, but the worst thing you could ever do is do a bad deal for your first deal, because you're setting yourself up for failure for the long term. Because you do one bad deal, and that, especially if that deal is your first deal, then it can set you back years if it's a really bad deal. So that is why you need to have your entrepreneurial hat on. The next thing is financial due diligence. Now, financial DD is, you should have done some of that up until this point. Should have done majority of it, to be perfectly honest. The more experience you get in acquisitions, the more of the financial DD you can do up front. So in fact, just today I was doing a lot of financial DD where I'm looking at two, main acquisitions at the moment that are further down the line, and I done a lot of financial DD today. So I looked at the P&L, I looked at the balance sheet, I looked at their rent. So I looked at the normalized costs. So there's a lot of things that I was looking at today, which will give me enough information to be comfortable with this deal moving forward. And of course, that doesn't mean that, if we go for one of these, we're probably going to go for both of them, that I'm not going to hand it to my accountant. Of course, I'm going to hand it to my accountant and say, right, now I found all of this information. Number one, check my assumptions. And number two, go and do everything else. Oh, we also looked at, because the government has increased taxes, bad news for everyone, or in business anyway, there's increased taxes, so I've done the tax adjustments too. Tax adjustments. So I was doing a lot of the financial DD, and I haven't even made my first offer yet. Now I've actually built the offer for one of the deals, and for one of the deals I just need a little bit for more information before I can build the offer for that. So I'm going to make the offer on one of them. The other one, once I've got the other information, I'm going to make the offer for that one. Because remember, the most important things is finding deals, making offers, and raising finance. That's the main important things when you're doing acquisitions. So financial due diligence, you give it up to your accountant. But now long story short, why was I saying all of that is because the better you get at acquisitions, a lot of the financial DD you can do yourself and write up a summary or write up a couple of bullet points. I've basically just done bullet points, and I'm going to shoot that off to my accountant and say, right, now you go and do the due diligence. So these two, really, you just give to your lawyer and your accountant. Use professionals to do that. Now, when it comes down to operational due diligence, this is where you or someone that you hire come in. Now, operational due diligence is done by industry expert. It's done by, and I'm going to rub these two out because I think this is really straightforward. You just basically give it to your lawyer and your accountant, and they do it. But you have the entrepreneurial hat on to move things towards completion. Operational DD, industry expert, done by industry expert. Now, what does industry expert mean? Industry expert means is that they have the ability to assess a business in that particular industry. So ability to assess a business. Ability to assess a business. Now, what does that even mean? What does it mean to assess a business? Any business, so number one, now we're going into business itself. There are 6 functions within every single business, right? 6 functions within the business. I'm not going to go into all of them. In fact, let's just go into the business cycle, which is a little bit easier to understand. So let's put it here. The first thing is marketing. Then you've got sales. Then you've got delivery. Then you've got resell. Right? So this is different to the 6 functions. This is different to the six functions. But any business is doing this. So number one, they're marketing to get customers. Then they're going to turn those leads into sales. Then they're going to, once they've sold, they're going to deliver the product or service. Then they're going to resell or upsell, depending on the type of business it is. Right? They're going to resell and upsell or upsell and upsell, depending on the kind of business it is. And then that's going to flow back to sales. It could flow back to marketing as well. Again, depending on the type of business it is. Now, what your industry expert is doing, an operational DD, and when I say what your industry expert is doing, is that you could be the industry expert, but you should be able to assess the business in these 4 categories in this business cycle, because it all goes round, right? I should have done a circle. It works in a circle as well, but that's fine. You get the point. Does the business work in this framework, in this business cycle? And does the business have the management of all of these functions? So, management of these functions. Not only the management, but the delivery of the management and delivery of the functions. Now, of course, you have HR, you have finance, you have customer support, you have admin. So these are the other things that you need to take a look at when you're assessing the viability of this operation, the operations of this business. That do you have the HR capacity, the human capital to be able to deliver this business cycle? Do you have the financial management to be able to make sure that this business cycle is being deployed profitably? Do you have the customer support that if customers need, for example, support outside of these sales and delivery and resell, do you have the customer support function to be able to support your customers? Do you have the administration support or administrative support to be able to deliver all of these functions, deliver the business cycle without the business breaking apart? And you've got accurate record keeping of that. So when your operational industry expert is doing the due diligence, they're number one looking at this business cycle, and they're looking at the management and the delivery of the functions, and they're ensuring that all of these 4 are there, plus more, of course. They're looking at, can this all happen without the presence of the shareholders, meaning the current shareholders? Because when you're buying the business, then the shareholders exit. And what do I mean by shareholders exit? Meaning the current owners, they exit. Look, when you buy a business, you need to make sure that the current owner leaving is not going to impact this or that, or the management or the delivery of the business cycle. Because the worst situation is that the owner exits and all of your customers leave. And also you're looking at your customers and your staff, customers, suppliers, staff. So many things that you have to look at when you're looking at the operational viability of a business. So that's why you have to ensure that your operation DD is done by an industry expert, whether that's you or you hire someone to ensure that the business can continue to run in the way that it's currently running and even better in the future. Also, during due diligence, you always want to keep in touch with your investors and your lenders. So keep in touch with financiers, because they're deploying their money into your deal. So it's important that you update them. And now it doesn't mean that you need to give them reports. Now some investors actually want that, but that's a bad situation. You probably not want to work with that investor, but you want to keep them up to date. Say, right, we're moving the deal forward, and for example, let's say you start off and you're targeting 90 days to completion, and then you give them an update. Say, oh, we're 60 days away because we've done X. We're 30 days away because we've done Y. We're going to complete next week. And it's actually important that as the deal gets closer and closer to completion, that you keep them up to date, because when you call on that capital, when you ask them to deploy that capital, they need to have enough notice, they need to be available, and they need to have enough notice to be able to transfer that money to your solicitor's accounts. That's why as the deal gets closer and closer to completion, keep them up to date. Say, right, we're probably going to need the money on this date, so please be ready to deploy the capital there. So your investors are going to be very grateful that you're keeping them in the loop, and also they'll know exactly when to deploy the capital. So that's why it's really important to keep in touch with your lenders, to keep in touch with your investors, to keep in touch with the people who are giving you money and trusting you to be able to put their capital to work. So I think that's it for due diligence today. But there's so many questions. Again, now when it comes down to due diligence, each business is different, and each business has their own little unique nuances that you need to take care of, each industry. So you need to ensure that you have the right people to be able to deliver this, whether it's legal, financial, or operational. That's it for due diligence. If you want to find out more about acquisitions, if you want to find out more about increasing enterprise value and exits, continue watching videos on this channel, and I'll see you on the next video.